Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another edition of One Plus One, your place for inconvenient truth telling and myth busting. On the program, we return to our All Things Africa edition, our journey across the continent, looking at the history and current affairs of each African nation. We now explore the country of Western Sahara, and who better to teach us about this African nation or any African country than our returning champion and history teacher, our historical guide, Abayomi Azikiwe of Pan African Newswire and frequent contributor to Black Agenda Report. Abayomi, as everyone should know by now, was an independent journalist and historian and anti-imperialist campaigner and more. And as always, before we start, a reminder to our audience to please share widely all of One Plus One's content, past and present episodes, our playlists, and help us overcome the far-right algorithms and the dominant monopoly Western corporate state media and pseudo-leftist websites have in the social media world by sharing our content. Share us across, again, social media and email. And please donate if you can to One Plus One at our PayPal. If people are having trouble and would prefer an alternative form to donations, then do please get in touch with me at youri@gmail. And sometimes Facebook blocks my ability to share One Plus One. So again, please share widely. It helps the show immensely, and it's our only way of overcoming colonial, pro-imperialist, sexist, and heteronormative and racist media. And now, on to the topic at hand. So, Abayomi, first off, thank you for joining us again.
Of course, this has been really a wonderful experience, rereading, restudying, researching all of these African states. And you get a chance to look at the updated archaeological and historical information that's come out over the last several years in all of these different states as well as geopolitical regions on the African continent.
Yes, and now, and of course, we are continuing. We're now, of course, we're now on to North Africa, and let's get into it. And of course, always an honor that you donate so generously your time for us. So thank you very much for that. So now on to Western Sahara. So Abayomi, as always, tell us, what was Western Sahara like before Spanish colonization, and what were the conditions of the people like under Spain, and what was what was France, if there was any role in the French Empire in this arrangement? I'm very curious to response.
Yeah, there's definitely a role in regard to both France and Spain. But to respond to your first question, the Sahara as a region of Northwest Africa, which later became known this particular area became known as the Maghreb, meaning Northwest Africa. But the Sahara Desert itself, up until about 5,000 years ago, was not a desert. It was a lush, green area where agricultural production thrived. And this can be traced back to the ancient Egyptian civilizations, the ancient Sudanese civilizations, which flourished any time between approximately 4,500 BC up until the period of the Greeks and later Roman empires, which intervened in North Africa during that particular time period. The area that is known today as the Western Sahara, of course, cannot be separated. Its history, its geopolitical status and economy cannot be separated from other areas in the region. And the reason I say this is because the people of the Sahara were heavily involved in the development and the carrying out of civilized communities going back millenniums. In fact, the people known as the Getulia were there going back at least to 1000 BC. They were recorded, their existence was recorded by some of the ancient Roman historians who wrote in regard to developments in Northwest Africa. So yes, there's written documented proof that there were civilizations in the Northwest Africa region, in the Sahara area. And of course, this is very, very important in understanding the contemporary situation. There was also the Garamantes. This was another people who had widespread civilizations in Northwest Africa. They, it's speculated, were there even prior to the Christian era, going back to at least 1000 BC. By the second century, you had the emergence of other civilizations, major civilizations. They also developed irrigation systems. And then in the area, what is today known as modern day Libya, there was the civilization of Vezan. Vezan is today the southern region of Libya. And the reason why I mention this is because the people of the Western Sahara are not just the people who constitute the Western Sahara today. Other groups came in, they left, they joined larger confederations of states. So this is a very, very interesting period. Fezzan, for example, according to Herodotus, who was the Greek historian, wrote in the 5th century BC that Fezzan was a very highly developed civilization, even as early as the 5th century BC. Now, Herodotus is considered the father of Western historical studies.
Uh-huh.
He wrote a lot, about developments in Egypt and other parts of North Africa. Yet, his writings on Africa have been subject to criticism and even dismissed by Western, particularly American scholars. For example, William Leo Hansberry, who was an African-American historian who studied at Harvard University during the early part of the 20th century. He got a teaching position at Howard University during the mid-1920s. Now, he studied undergraduate and graduate studies, bachelor's and master's degrees at Harvard. But the Harvard History Department would not grant him a PhD because they felt it would be dangerous. There's a rumor that he challenged a professor in one of his classes, saying that Herodotus, quoting Herodotus, in regard to the development of civilization in North Africa. And this professor said he doesn't consider Herodotus as a legitimate source as it relates to African history. Well, this is absurd because on the one hand, they're saying that Herodotus was the father, the progenitor of the Western historical canon. Yet at the same time, some say, well, he was just a big liar when it came to Africa. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say he was the founder of Western history.
So because, and I'm sure there's even limitations to this Greek historian, this Greek anthropologist, but because he has the audacity to say that there was civilizations ruled by brown people, ruled by very dark-skinned people, that is just that's just heresy for the dominant Western white people who keep thinking that civilization all starts with very Greece. White Greeks, very white Romans, and of course Cleopatra looks like a very white Elizabeth Taylor. I assume.
Yeah, they always emphasize that she was Greek, but what did that really mean? During that particular time period, and Herodotus went as far as to say that the civilizations that he traveled through and witnessed were more advanced than the civilizations in ancient Greece at that particular time period. So that does not bode well for modern day Western intellectual interests. So anyway, William Leo Hansberry was never given a PhD from Harvard, but he went on to teach at Howard University, and his classes were so popular that people could barely get into them. They would have to wait a year, 2 years, 3 years to get into his classes. They were just that interesting. And later, though, he was able to travel to Ethiopia and Nigeria. In fact, he was made a visiting professor at the university in Ethiopia. He also delivered lectures in Nigeria as well during the 1960s. Interestingly enough, William Leo Hansberry was the uncle of Lorraine Hansberry, the famed playwright and essayist who wrote A Raisin in the Sun and other plays. She gained a lot of notoriety in the late 50s, early 60s. Unfortunately, she died in 1965 from pancreatic cancer at the age of 34.
Oh, wow.
But her family, they were like geniuses. Her father was very instrumental in breaking down housing segregation in the United States going back to the 1930s and 1940s. Um, he was in Chicago, based in Chicago. But just to point out that Northwest Africa had very advanced civilizations going back well over a millennia, 2 millennia, in fact. So this is very important to point out that when the Europeans say that they brought civilization to Africa, the historical record and even the anthropological and archaeological records do not support that claim. So this is what happened during that particular time period. Then you had waves of other peoples who came into the area. For example, beginning in the 8th century, you had the Islamization of the Maghreb with the Arab groups that came in from southern Arabia. And even that, is a question of race in regard to the original Arabs. Even the Berbers, for example, who are considered indigenous to Northwest Africa, if you look at the record, they compose people of multiple skin tones and ethnicities.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
this is very, very interesting when you look at this. There was a wave that came in the 8th century, again, another wave that came in the 11th century, the so-called Bani Arabs, who came in the 11th century from southern Arabia or the area today known as Yemen. So all of this was going on for many, many centuries. In fact, the Sahrawi people, the people of the Sahara, were also instrumental in the ancient kingdom of Carthage, which was located in modern day Tunisia. And they had a huge city state there. Hannibal is known as a historical figure. And they launched several wars against Rome, the so-called Punic Wars. And
Yes.
these wars were protracted conflicts, and the Sahrawi people were involved in these conflicts way, way, way back, approximately 2,000 years ago or more. Then, of course, we had the rise of Western colonialism and imperialism after the demise of the Atlantic slave trade, the Berlin West Africa Conference of 1884 and 1885, where they sat down, these European colonial powers and former slave merchants sat down and carved up Africa like it was a huge cake. And Spain laid claim to the area today known as the Western Sahara. They worked it out with France, which laid claim to Morocco and other areas in Northwest Africa. So that's what happened during that particular time period. Now, we could go on and talk about the resistance, unless you have another question.
Please do. So, talk to us about what were the conditions of the people of Western Sahara under Spain, which was first in absolute monarch, and then briefly it was a secular Spanish republic, and then the fascists took over. They reinstalled the monarch. The power really lay in the hands of Franco and his fascist goons. And yes, so talk to us. What were the conditions of the people like under Spanish colonialism, and then and then from there you can talk about how Western Sahara became. Yeah. So sorry about that. So let's first look. Yeah, let's just talk about what were the conditions like of the people of Western Sahara under Spanish colonialism, and then we'll get to how it became a Moroccan colony.
Well, the conditions were highly repressive and exploitative, and this prompted broad resistance on the part of the people of that region of Northwest Africa. They claimed that was their protectorate as early as 1884 and 1885, the Spanish. Yet they had to work in collaboration with the French to put down numerous successive rebellions on the part of the indigenous people there. It wasn't until 1912 that they could even claim some semblance of stability within the Western Sahara. which they named Spanish Sahara. Later, they merged, well, this took place in the 1950s. They merged the North and the South provinces of the Western Sahara. But as late as 1932, they were still putting down rebellions on the part of the people in that area. Then, of course, the Spanish-American War had a role to play in the late 19th century, where Spain, after being defeated by U.S. imperialism, was in dire straits economically. So they attempted to sell their interests in the Spanish Sahara to the Austria-Hungary Empire. Now, they were interested, the Austro-Hungarian Empire were interested in purchasing it, but they could not reach an agreement between Austria and Hungary to purchase the area known as the Western Sahara, because they wanted a foothold in this whole scramble for Africa that took place during the late 19th and early 20th centuries.
Interesting.
But it took all the way up to 1932 to try to put down the rebellions that were taking place against Spanish as well as French rule in the area. Later, after World War II, with the wave of anti-colonialism throughout the world, Africa, of course, included, they, during that particular time period, had to fight the people again. Between 1956 and 1958, there was an armed uprising, and this armed uprising was led by the Moroccan Liberation Army. And the Moroccan Liberation Army was both in the Kingdom of Morocco as well as in the Spanish Sahara. And in 1958, the rebellion was crushed, but it split the Moroccan Liberation Army, those who were pro-Moroccan and those who were pro-independence for the Spanish Sahara. Later, during the 1960s, agitation for independence continued, either through nonviolent means or through rebellion. By 1970, there was agitation on the campuses in Morocco among the students from the Spanish Sahara, demanding full independence for that territory. Then in 1973, you had the formation of the Polisario Front, which is a national liberation movement that brought about in 1976 the declaration of the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, the SADR. The SADR considers itself a government in exile, and they have been demanding since 1976 full independence for the Spanish Sahara.
Yes.
During the 1970s, Spain, having suffered economically in the whole fascist dictatorial regime of Francisco Franco, he died in 1975. By that time, they want to relinquish their control of colonies, particularly the Spanish Sahara, because there was tremendous resistance against their rule. So they were looking for a way of relinquishing that control. Also, the International Court of Justice, which is the highest legal body of the United Nations, issued a ruling in 1975 saying that even though Morocco and Mauritania share interests and even ethnicities with people of the Western Sahara, it was not sufficient for them to claim ownership to subsume the Western Sahara into either Mauritania or Morocco. So they had a legal basis for independence. But this has been ignored completely by Morocco and the people who back them, who are principally the Western imperialist countries like the US and the others. So what happened in 1976, they declared their independence. The armed struggle was continuing. By 1979, the Mauritanian government said, we want to get out of this. So they relinquished any claims to the Western Sahara, the former Spanish Sahara, which left Morocco as the sole occupying force in the area. So the Polisario Front and the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic continued to fight on the ground. They also continued to engage in diplomatic struggles internationally. So by 1982, the Organization of African Unity, looking at the current situation inside the country, uh, wanted to make a decision to recognize them as a de facto independent state. This is in 1982. This was at an OAU summit in Libya. And this was under the rule of the Jemahariya, led by Colonel Muammar Gaddafi. And this caused a major split inside the Organization of African Unity in 1982. They could not get a quorum in 82. 83, it was still a stalemate. And in 1984, they were able to get a vote which recognized the SADR as an independent state, as a government in exile. So Morocco was so incensed by these developments that they withdrew their membership from the Organization of African Unity. And they were backed by the Western imperialist countries, but they were also supported by some African states as well. Sadly enough, even President Ahmed Sékou in 1982 took a position against recognition of the SADR by the Organization of African Unity. And a lot of people were very disappointed by that decision. He attempted to rationalize it in various ways, but nonetheless, in 1984, he died suddenly. We talked about Guinea earlier. He died actually in Cleveland, Ohio, but he had collapsed from a massive heart attack while he was visiting Saudi Arabia. But it's believed that Sékou Touré took this position because of his close economic ties with the Kingdom of Morocco. So in 1984, they get recognized as a de facto government in exile by the African Union. The United Nations recognized them as the Polisario Front as a legitimate liberation movement fighting for self-determination, but they have not recognized them as a state or a government in exile. So that is what happened as of 1984. So Morocco was out of the African Union. Well, first it was the OAU, and then in 2002, it was the OAU was transformed to the African Union.
Yes.
This was after the another OAU conference in Libya, in Sirte, in 1999, and that was what was called the Sirte Declaration. The Sirte was supposedly the home area of Muammar Gaddafi. The Sirte Declaration was a more comprehensive program for African unity. It called for a single currency, a single military force, quite similar to what Dr. Kwame Nkrumah had advocated as far back as the 1960s at the founding of the Organization of African Unity in Ethiopia in 1963. 1964, he continued to advocate for a United States of Africa. 1965, the last year that he was in office before being overthrown by the United States Central Intelligence Agency, he called for the immediate formation of the United States of Africa. Of course, he was overthrown several months later. So the Sirte Declaration led to the formation of the African Union, and the African Union continues today after some 23 years. Yet, Morocco, who had been out of the OAU and the African Union since 1984, in 2007, all of a sudden they wanted to rejoin the African Union. They had some supporters who were in favor of that, but there were a number of people who were against it, a number of states. For example, Algeria, which supports as a rear base the SADR and the Polisario Front.
Yes.
Their headquarters is in Algeria. Also, South Africa, all of these Southern African Development Community states and other states around the world opposed Morocco re-entering the African Union. Nonetheless, some of the more moderate and right-wing states like the Federal Republic of Nigeria and others voted in favor of readmitting Morocco. Now, why did South Africa and Algeria and other countries oppose the Kingdom of Morocco's readmission into the African Union? Because they had not settled the Western Sahara question. In 1991, there was a ceasefire declared on the
Actually,
part of the, okay.
before we get there, tell our audience about tell our audience a bit more about how did Western Sahara become what I and many others would describe as a colony of Morocco, and then also talk about what were the conditions of the people of Western Sahara like under Morocco's first king when Morocco became independent from France, and the first king was Mohammed V, who ruled Morocco from 1955 to his death in 1961, and what were the conditions of the people of Western Sahara like under King Hassan II from 1961 to 1999. So.
Well, during that particular time period, the country was still controlled by Spain. They didn't relinquish their claim to the area until around the mid 1970s. It was in part due to the demise of Franco, but also due to the ruling of the International Court of Justice in 1975 that the people of the Western Sahara had a right to self-determination and independence, although there were similarities between the peoples of Mauritania and Morocco. This did not necessarily guarantee them the right to incorporate that territory into Morocco or into Mauritania. But the conditions were bad under the Spanish colonial rule. And even when the area was relinquished by Mauritanian and it left the Kingdom of Morocco as the sole colonial power, although backed by the imperialist countries, the conditions continued to worsen in the Western Sahara. There was tremendous repression of the people, and the Polisario Front, of course, was considered a terrorist organization. The SADR was not recognized, even though they had been established. They had gotten an International Court of Justice ruling, and they had the backing of the Algerian government.
Interesting. And so under both King Mohammed V, from 1955 to 61, and then so conditions were very repressive, and then talk a bit more about what were the conditions of the people of Western Sahara like under King Hassan II, 1961 to 1999.
It continued because they were laying claim to this territory, even under the Spanish colonial rule. And this is late, in regard to the whole African independence struggle.
Yes.
Morocco had gotten its independence. Tunisia, Algeria got its independence in 1962. So if we're looking at the situation in the 1960s, it fueled the sentiment and militancy of the people of the Western Sahara because the conditions were bad, they were repressive, and the people there were not allowed to exercise their right to self-determination. Now, according to the OAU charter, any country that had been formally colonized had a right to self-determination and independence. They could decide to federate with other existing independent states or non-independent states. For example, Cameroon, they were divided between British colonialism and French colonialism. A part of Cameroon joined the Federal Republic of Nigeria. We have similar situations, for example, in Ghana, the Gold Coast, and Togoland.
Yeah.
Part of Togoland joined the Republic of Ghana in the early days of its independence. And the other considered French section of the country remained independent and does remain independent up until this day.
So that's crazy. So that's crazy. And again, I think we have to emphasize something. So Morocco for many years, of course, was a colony of France, and it gets nominal independence. 1955 and onwards. Again, and of course, we have to remind our audience that both Spain and Portugal, until the 1970s, still had colonies, and they were both under far right dictatorships.
Exactly.
Salazar and Franco. So that being said, it is kind of astonishing that when Spain is decolonizing and gives Western Sahara its independence, all of a sudden Morocco goes, "Oh no, now you're our country."
Well, they didn't give it independence per se. They relinquished control to Mauritania and Morocco. Spain, they washed
Yes.
their hands of the colonial problem in the Spanish Sahara and told the Moroccans and the Mauritanians, since you laid claim to this territory, that you should run it and resolve the internal problems.
Okay.
But the
Okay.
Polisario Front continued to fight. So by 1979, the Mauritanian government said, no, we want out. We have no claims to the Western Sahara. But Morocco maintained their domination of the country up until this day.
Unbelievable. So then, so you already talked to us about how there's been a lot of repression of the aspirations of the people of Western Sahara under the first king. Well, not under the first king, but under the first king post-independence Morocco, King Mohammed V, and then later King Hassan III, 1961 to 1999. Talk to us about the conditions of the people of Western Sahara. Did they get better in some ways, or just worse under King Mohammed VI, who has been king since 1999 and is the current king ruler of Morocco?
They've gotten worse objectively because the people there want a referendum on self-determination or national independence. And this was mandated by the United Nations as early as 1991. And this is what prompted the declaration of a ceasefire by the Polisario Front in 1991, under the guise that there would be a United Nations monitored referendum on the future of the country. This has never taken place. We're talking about 34 years where this has been mandated by the United Nations, but the Kingdom of Morocco, backed by the imperialist states, have refused to hold this referendum up until this day.
And has and so from the 19 actually so from the 1960s, although up until sometime in the 1990s, has there been what was there a mostly armed struggle for independence on the part of Western Sahara resistance to Morocco's colonizations? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, the Polisario Front was formed around 1973.
Okay.
A lot of the agitation took place among students at various Moroccan universities. They formed the Polisario Front with the aim of launching an armed struggle for national independence against the Spanish colonialists. And then after they relinquished control to Mauritania and Morocco, they fought Mauritania and Morocco during the late 1970s. And then in the 1979, the Mauritanian government said they wanted out of the situation and relinquished their claims to the Spanish Sahara. And of course, Morocco has maintained that it is part of their kingdom, that they do not have a right to self-determination or independence. So that is the current situation as it stands right now.
And there was a and there and this and there was a ceasefire done when in the 1990s.
In 1991, they
Okay.
declared a ceasefire in lieu of the holding of this referendum by the United Nations. But Morocco has refused to hold a United Nations mandated referendum. So in actuality, they're in violation of international law. The ICJ ruling during the mid 1970s, and also the negotiated agreement to hold this referendum there. So the ceasefire, despite that, the ceasefire was maintained pretty much up until recently, where they lifted the ceasefire based upon the fact that obviously Morocco was not going to relinquish control or even hold a referendum. Now, the referendum would determine whether the majority of the people there would vote in favor of annexation by Morocco, some type of autonomous status within Morocco, or full national independence on the part of the people of the Western Sahara, these Sahrawi people, which is like an Arabized version of the Sahara, people of the Sahara. Yes. So, but what has happened though, since the readmission of the Kingdom of Morocco to the African Union in 2017, they have been effectively lobbying other African states and even Western imperialist states to establish diplomatic relations and also to accept their new plan for the Western Sahara, which is a form of autonomy for the area, but under the domination of the Kingdom of Morocco. So the United States in 2020, during the waning days of the first administration of Donald Trump, signed on to this plan. And other states have signed on to it. People in the European Union and others are saying now that this is the most viable option to resolve the Western Sahara question. But others disagree. The ANC of South Africa is still maintaining their position. And other countries, Algeria, Zimbabwe, have still maintained their position that there should be a referendum held, United Nations supervised referendum held in the Western Sahara to determine their future. So it's very contentious. In fact, the readmission of Morocco to the African Union was opposed, not only by Algeria, but also by many members of the Southern African Development Community as well. But they were outnumbered by the other member states of the African Union, and they were readmitted. The argument that Zimbabwe and South Africa used, the ZANU-PF and African National Congress, was that if the OAU and later the AU's charter is for decolonization, why does this not apply to the Western Sahara? How can you say you're for decolonization in all the other areas of the African continent, yet you're allowing Morocco, which is in violation of international law, which is denying the right of self-determination to the Sahrawi people, why are they being allowed inside of an organization, a continental organization, which is committed through their own charter to decolonization? So it's a contradiction within the African Union itself. So these problems are still ongoing. The situation has by no means been resolved.
And since, very briefly, since the ceasefire, has the resistance to Moroccan colonization been mostly nonviolent, or it's been both armed struggle, spontaneous armed struggle, as well as nonviolent resistance?
Yeah, there were rebellions, but recently, in recent years, the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, with the Polisario Front as their national liberation movement, have lifted their ceasefire. So they're saying, right now, according to them, they have a right to launch military attacks against the Kingdom of Morocco. So that's where the situation is right now.
And in terms of social mobility, which decade, despite repression, conditions one would argue are like settler colonialism or unjust military occupation, but in terms of social mobility for the vast working class, poor people, and precarious middle class folks of Western Sahara, I'm very yeah. So which decade has social mobility been good, despite the vast majority of people being very poor, or which period has been, or I'm just very curious your response to that.
I don't think there's been any real social mobility on the part of the people. There are some people who have said that they relinquish their claim to national independence and have pretty much sided with the Moroccan monarchy, but the overwhelming majority of the Western Sahara people, it is believed, based upon the evidence and the sentiment that exists, that they are in favor of national independence. So this is the real issue that they want to resolve, but the conditions are dire for the majority of the people. Many of them, they control about perhaps 25%, that is the Polisario Front and the SADR control about 25% of the territory. But most of the people there live in refugee camps. They live in tents. So there's really been no real progress made under the domination of the Kingdom of Morocco.
Wow. And what do the and again, what do the people of Western Sahara who are living in that country within Morocco, do most of those people desire independence? And what does the diaspora of Western Sahara desire? Also independence? And what's and actually us and the follow-up question to that is, what makes the people of Western Sahara distinct as a people, which makes Morocco's arguments over the right to rule under Western Sahara just not credible? Because that's where we really have to get into the nitty gritty to push back against the Moroccan argument that this has always been Moroccan, except for colonizers taking over and and so forth.
This has been their argument of both the Kingdom of Morocco and earlier Mauritania. Yet, it doesn't matter. All over Africa, you had colonial divisions of peoples who have the same language, similar languages, similar cultures, people who are involved in the same civilizations. Yet, when the colonialists came in and divided all these territories and destroyed these ancient and more modern civilizations, they still, after the colonial period, had a right under international law and even under the Charter of the Organization of African Unity and the AU, they have a right to self-determination. Now, if there was a vote held and the majority of the people in the Western Sahara decided for autonomy or to integrate fully into the Kingdom of Morocco, then the argument perhaps would be over. They were given the right to self-determination. Yet, Morocco does not want to hold a referendum because they know the overwhelming majority of the people in that area would vote for national independence. So this is the distinction. But you can go, let's say, between Zimbabwe and South Africa, for example.
Yeah.
Some of the same peoples exist on both sides of the border. The Matabele, they're in Zimbabwe, but they're also in South Africa. The Mashona, they even have people, they're the majority in the Republic of Zimbabwe, but they're also Mashona in the Republic of South Africa as well. Going further east, the Shagan people in northern South Africa also have many people in Mozambique. So under the AU Charter and even under the United Nations regulations, it wouldn't be proper, for example, for people in Mozambique to say, okay, well, we're going to go in and all the areas in which the Shagan live should be under our control.
Yeah.
I don't think that would fly, even in contemporary African Union terms. So the whole question is the right to self-determination for the people, and this has been denied for the people of the Western Sahara. This is considered Africa's last colony. This is how it's being viewed and spoken about internationally. That all these other questions have been resolved. Namibia, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Angola, Mozambique, Guinea-Bissau, you name it. Even Djibouti, which was formerly French Somaliland, which did not get its independence until the 1970s. You have Somalis who are divided into 5 different nation states in East Africa. There are Somalians in Ethiopia, in Somalia itself, in Kenya, and also in Djibouti, and also in Kenya. So some Somalians have advocated in the past that they should all be united. Well, this was caused a lot of turmoil in East Africa. Now, if these other states were willing to relinquish the Somalian populations, then that would be a different thing. For example, the war in the Ogaden during the late 1970s, where Siad Barre, after switching from being an ally of the Soviet Union and the socialist camp after 1969, broke with that and was courted and recruited by the United States, which told them in 1977 and 1978 they would back the Western Somalia Liberation Front based in Ethiopia, in the Somalia region of Ethiopia, to join Somalia. And they launched a war in that regard, and they were defeated miserably by the Ethiopians, backed by the Cuban internationalists who were there to assist them in 1978. So it's somewhat complicated, but if you look, at the OAU Charter, the African Union Charter, and also the United Nations Charter, it's all there. That any former colony had a right to self-determination. The Eritrean question was somewhat similar. Ethiopia had been ceded control of Eritrea initially as a province, and later was incorporated in 1960. And the Eritrean Liberation Front was formed around 1961. And then there was a split in 1969, 1970 to the Eritrean People's Liberation Front, which is pretty much the de facto government in Eritrea, the state of Eritrea right now. Now, when Ethiopia became socialist oriented after the revolution of 1974, and they became allied with the Soviet Union, there was an appeal for the Eritrean Liberation Front and the EPLF to join the broader Ethiopian state. They refused to do that. And they had very limited recognition and support, even within the socialist camp. Previously, the Eastern European socialist countries were proponents of Eritrean independence, going all the way back to 1950. But after the developments of the mid-1970s, with the overthrow of Haile Selassie and the rise of the Provisional Military Organizing Committee, popularly known as the DERG, their position shifted. Even the Cubans, they said that they did not want to get involved directly in the war against the Eritreans. Eventually, after the Workers' Party of Ethiopia in 1991 collapsed, a lot of it had to do with the collapse of the Comecon sector and the eventual fall of the USSR in late 1991, that the Ethiopian government under Mengistu Haile Mariam collapsed, and Eritrea declared independence. And they had a referendum backed by the United Nations in 1993 that solidified their independence, and they've been an independent state for the last 32 years. So this follows a similar pattern that the people of the Western Sahara have been denied the right to hold this referendum. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that the United States does not want the emergence of a left-leaning national liberation movement, even though the people there are only 500 to 600,000 people.
Well, fun enough, that was exactly my next question, which is
Okay, go ahead.
So that's interesting. So majority of African countries, however imperfect they are, however much to the right some of them are, however much to the imperfect left some of them are, or all in between, are actually mostly in favor of Western Sahara at least having the right to a referendum on whether they want to be part of Morocco or an independent country. So that being said, and so you have this humongous disconnect between what Africans want and what African solutions to African problems, and then of course the Western world and its allies. So where does the US, UK, Canada, France, much of the EU, NATO members stand on Western Sahara, and that of much of the Gulf nations, West Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia, Far East Asia, like China, both Koreas, Japan, Where do they stand on Western Sahara?
Very interesting question. The United States in 2020, during the waning days of the first administration of Donald Trump, said that they recognized Morocco's control over the Western Sahara. And this opened the floodgates for other European imperialist countries to follow suit. Then Morocco came up with a plan for autonomy for the people of the Western Sahara, absent of their input. And they're saying now this is the only viable solution to the Western Sahara question. Now, some people have adopted that position. The people in France and other European Union countries have abandoned even a call for a referendum. At one point, it was like 84 countries within the United Nations General Assembly which supported independence for the Western Sahara. That has been reduced. And a lot of it has to do with the influence of the Kingdom of Morocco and their backers in Washington, London, Paris, and so forth. So the commitment for the referendum and for the independence of the Western Sahara has diminished among nation states over the last several years. But this does not mean that the ongoing control by the Kingdom of Morocco is sustainable because people can resist in many different ways. Moreover, internally in Morocco, there's a lot of dissent against the monarchy. There was just uprisings last month, the month before.
Yeah.
They were labeled as Gen Z demonstrations, but I think that's an oversimplification of what happened. When they label stuff like Gen Z and so forth, it's an effort to influence the direction of these opposition movements.
Yeah.
So with Morocco facing internal opposition, how sustainable are they as a nation state? And if there's cracks in the capacity of the Moroccan state to maintain control over their people, this could actually open up new avenues for the people of the Western Sahara to not only hold this referendum, but even absent of the referendum, a recognition of their national independence by a potential new Moroccan government. I'm not saying that's going to happen soon, but if you have an unstable system like what exists in Morocco, it's a strong potentiality for this to happen. And not just the young people that were upset. There have been strikes in Morocco among teachers and workers over the deplorable conditions that exist within the education sector and other sectors of the working class in Morocco.
What does?
So,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I wanted to ask what does Morocco use Western Sahara from? Because I understand when I was doing research on ChatGPT that Morocco often uses Western Sahara as sort of a cheap labor exploitative tourism front, and Morocco what what it does in order to sort of you know change the demographics and change the mentality of the Western Sahara is that they'll often send big real estate folks and others from Morocco to basically exploits Western Sahara for its own gain, and also and also apparently the people of Western Sahara. Well, I mean Morocco in general. Freedom of the press is not. Their rankings is usually quite low when these NGOs study about freedom of the press, and apparently for Western Saharans or even Moroccans to express any kind of dissent on the issue of Western Sahara, it's quite repressive. But what does so I'm very curious. What does Morocco use Western Sahara from? Like what part of their economy do they use as exploitation? Because when Indonesia, because Indonesia in the 1970s, backed by the West,
Kissinger and all of them.
brutally invaded East Timor, committed a yeah,
Massacres.
exactly,
Hundreds of
a
thousands of people
genocide.
were slaughtered.
It was a 2 decade long genocide, and at the height of Indonesia's unjustified, illegal occupation of East Timor, they were exploiting East Timor's oil reserves. None of it went to the East Timorese. It all went to Indonesia and its partners, Australia, the West, Canada, and so forth. So what does Western Sahara do with? So what does Morocco do with Western Sahara?
They have natural resources that are being exploited by the Moroccans in the area of phosphates in particular. So that is one of the main underlying reasons why they do not want to relinquish control of the Western Sahara to the Western Sahara people themselves, because they want to exploit the natural resources of that territory. Plus, the politics of it all. The Polisario Front has been known, as a left-wing liberation movement. The Sahara Arab Democratic Republic is left-leaning, although if you read their constitution, they say that they're open for the people to decide which type of economic system will be instituted within an independent Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic government. But underlining all of that, of course, is the natural resources that exist in the Sahrawi region.
It's crazy, and when I was doing some research, I also, was asking the Chat GPT, is what Morocco does with Western Sahara very similar to what Turkey did with Cyprus? Now, we don't have all the time in the world to get into it. I'm actually doing a disservice to the topic by oversimplifying it. But basically, Turkey invaded northern Cyprus, annexed northern Cyprus, and actually a majority of actually Turkish Cypriots, as well as Greek Cypriots, would actually like the island to just be independent, not part of Greece, not part of Turkey, but just be its own independent state. That was something that for both Greeks from the mainland Greece and Greek Cypriots themselves, that was a huge thing for them to sacrifice, that we no longer believe that Cyprus should be part of Greece, that it should just be its own independent country. And yet Turkey continues illegally to have, to occupy northern Cyprus, and Turkish Cypriots themselves actually complain about that, and they describe the conditions of them under Turkey as comparable to settler colonialism, where they themselves actually don't have much of a say, and Turkey continues to get people from mainland Turkey into northern Cyprus to change not just the demographics, but even to change the mentality. Is that what Morocco does with Western Sahara? I'm very curious your response.
Yes, but there's a check placed on that by the Algerian government, which is the strongest supporter of the SADR. So they're not able to move as rapidly as they want to, because in the past, during the early 1960s, there was a war, a brief war between Algeria, the newly independent Algeria, and Morocco, which the Cuban internationalists had intervened and helped Algeria to prevail in that conflict. It was an effort, undoubtedly, to cripple or either overthrow the National Liberation Front government that was established in Algeria after 1962. So with Algeria being right there, and with the headquarters of the SADR being based in southern Algeria, that places a hold on their capacity to do that. Also, the fact that the Sahrawi people are armed and organized is another deterrent in regard to Morocco moving in completely. But they're trying to economically outflank Algeria and the other states that support the SADR. That's what's actually going on. But the fact that there's only 500 to 600,000 people in the Western Sahara really doesn't make a difference because I think it's the politics that's involved in all of this. And let's say if the referendum is allowed to take place and the people vote to establish their own independent Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, what impact will that have on Morocco and other contiguous states in the Maghreb region? Could very well prompt other efforts aimed at reversing the process of neocolonialism in that region.
And why is the plight of Western Sahara given so little attention, and why not more solidarity is given to Western Sahara? And why do you think? Yeah, and again, why do you think, as leftists, anti-imperialists, we should support Western Sahara's independence from Morocco?
Well, this has been a major issue among the progressive and revolutionary liberation movements and progressive states. Nelson Mandela, after he was released from 27 and a half years in prison in the apartheid South Africa, he went to the United Nations. He was invited to address the United Nations in June of 1990. And in that speech, he said, we must continue to advocate for the self-determination and independence of the Palestinians as well as the Western Sahara. And he got huge applause when he made that statement. You can go back and listen to that speech. So that had an impact on people internationally. So anti-imperialist forces today still support the independence of the Western Sahara from Morocco, and also the relationship between the Kingdom of Morocco and France and the United States is also a key factor. They do not want the emergence of a 55th African Union member state that gained its independence as a result of armed struggle and international campaign to, in fact, reverse domination by the Kingdom of Morocco.
Interesting. And then just in closing, anything more you'd like to talk about regarding Western Sahara? Yeah, uh, anything more you'd like to talk about regarding Western Sahara?
Well, two things. One is that they are recognized as a de facto government by the African Union. Now, whenever the president and leadership of the SADR visits South Africa, for example, they're given the red carpet treatment. Same thing with the Republic of Zimbabwe. So that's very, very important to note. Also, they have their own press, the SADR and the Polisario Front, and it's online. You can read their press and become updated about developments in the SADR. So, despite the fact that it's typically a Western imperialist media blackout of the question and developments inside of the Western Sahara, but you can go directly to the SADR websites and the Polisario Front websites, which are in English. They have them in English as well, and read up on what's happening inside the territory on a daily and weekly basis.
Well, make sure to send me the link, and I'll be happy to put that in the link at the pinned
Great.
comment section on the YouTube. Well,
Great.
we're going to end there. Well, we were joined on this edition of One Plus One, our All Things Africa edition, with our always brilliant returning champion, the historian, journalist, and Pan-Africanist, leftist, and anti-imperialist, and friend to all people power movements, Abayomi Azikiwe of Pan-African Newswire and Black Agenda Report. Subscribe to both outlets and donate generously to them. Please, folks, share widely all of One Plus One's content. Donate generously if you can. And the next country we'll be exploring is the Kingdom of Morocco. And so continues our exploration of North Africa, and that chapter continues next week. Have a great weekend, folks. All my best. Good night and good luck. And the bass player of Stone Roses passed away, so we want to say rest in peace to him, and our condolences to his family and to the family of course, Stone Roses. All my best until then, folks. Good night and good luck.